You're walking down a crowded street. Hundreds of people pass by, faces, bodies, voices blending into a current of motion. You feel the press of the crowd, the hum of conversations, the shuffle of footsteps. But here's the part that will haunt you. Most of those people never existed for you. Not in memory, not even in perception. Your brain erased them in real time before they ever registered as human. You think you saw the crowd. You didn't. You saw a curated edit, a stripped-down version where entire living, breathing people were deleted like background noise. This isn't a metaphor. This is neuroscience. And it explains why, sometimes, you feel invisible. For centuries, philosophers wrestled with a terrifying question. If no one perceives you, do you truly exist? The medieval mystics feared it, being alive but unseen by God, by man, wandering the earth as a ghost among the living. Ancient Buddhists meditated on it, calling the self an illusion sustained only by the attention of others. But they lacked the tools to prove what they suspected, that perception is not passive. It is not a camera recording reality. It is a filter, ruthlessly deciding what gets to be real and what gets erased. In 1890, the psychologist William James wrote about selective attention, the brain's ability to focus on one thing while ignoring everything else. He described it as a spotlight. Whatever it illuminates exists. Everything outside the beam fades into darkness. But he didn't know how literal that darkness was. He didn't know that the brain doesn't just ignore the periphery, it actively suppresses it, shuts it down, erases it at the neural level before it ever reaches your consciousness. Then, in 1999, two psychologists named Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris shattered everything we thought we knew about seeing. They conducted an experiment so simple, so devastating, that it became one of the most famous studies in psychology. They showed people a video of two teams passing a basketball. The instructions were clear. Count how many times the players in white passed the ball. And while viewers focused, something extraordinary happened. A person in a gorilla suit walked into the center of the frame, beat their chest, and walked off. The gorilla was on screen for 9 full seconds. Half the viewers never saw it. Not forgot it, not missed it, never saw it. Their eyes recorded the image, but their brains deleted it before it became conscious. Because their attention was elsewhere, the gorilla, an absurd, impossible, unmissable figure, simply did not exist for them. When the researchers asked, "Did you see the gorilla?" the viewers were stunned, disbelieving. They insisted the video must have been swapped. But when they watched it again, without the counting task, there it was, solid, undeniable. A person in a gorilla suit walking through their vision, erased by their own minds. This phenomenon is called inattentional blindness, and it doesn't just apply to gorillas. It applies to people. Real living people standing right in front of you. In 2018, neuroscientists at MIT conducted brain scans while subjects watched crowded scenes. They tracked which faces registered in the brain's visual cortex and which didn't. The results were chilling. When attention was focused on a central task, reading signs, navigating, even just thinking, the brain suppressed up to 70% of peripheral faces. Not failed to remember them later, suppressed them in real time. The neural circuits responsible for face recognition never fired. Those people to the viewer's brain were not human. They were shapes, obstacles, noise. By 2025, the research had gone further. Scientists at Stanford used advanced imaging to watch the brain's attentional networks in action. They found that the superior colliculus, a structure deep in the midbrain, actively blocks visual signals it deems irrelevant. When you're focused, it doesn't just dim the periphery, it cuts it off entirely, preventing the information from ever reaching higher processing centers. And the brain's definition of irrelevant is brutal. A person you're not looking at, irrelevant. A face in a crowd, irrelevant. Someone walking past you on the street living their own complex emotional life? Your brain treats them like furniture. And here's the worst part. You have no idea it's happening. You feel like you're seeing the world. You believe you're aware of your surroundings, but you're not. You're seeing a heavily edited version, stripped of most human presence, tailored to whatever narrow task your attention decided was important. The rest, the vast, teeming reality of other people, is gone. Pause now. Think about the last time you walked through a crowded place, a mall, a subway, a busy street. How many faces do you actually remember? Not vague impressions, specific faces. The shape of a nose, the color of eyes. Psychologists have studied this. People who report feeling invisible in social situations aren't imagining it. Brain scans show that socially anxious individuals have heightened activity in the regions that monitor being ignored. They are hyper-aware of the erasure, sensitized to the absence of attention. And the cruelest irony? The more you fear being unseen, the more you notice when you are. The more you notice, the more isolated you feel. And the cycle tightens. There's a woman, let's call her Sarah, who described it perfectly. She said that walking through a crowded train station felt like being a ghost. Not metaphorically, literally. People would brush past her, nearly collide with her, and never once make eye contact. She would step aside, apologize, try to be seen, and nothing. She began to wonder if she was disappearing, if she was fading out of reality. Therapists told her it was social anxiety, low self-esteem, distorted thinking. But then she read about inattentional blindness, and she realized she wasn't crazy, she was right. People's brains were erasing her. She was invisible because their attention was elsewhere. And in the absence of attention, she did not exist. The question that remains, burning at the edge of thought, is this. If your brain erases people to survive the noise of existence, and everyone's brain does the same, then how much of reality is just a shared agreement to ignore each other? How many people walk past you every day, fully alive, fully complex, carrying entire inner worlds, but invisible because your brain decided they don't matter? And the deeper question, the one that follows you into the dark, if no one's brain registers you, if you pass through the world unseen, unrecorded, neurologically deleted, do you exist at all? The history of understanding attention is a history of realizing how little we actually see. For most of human existence, we believed perception was simple. Light enters the eye, the brain processes it, and we experience reality as it is. But that comforting illusion began to crack in the late 19th century. In 1890, William James, the father of American psychology, wrote that everyone knows what attention is. He described it as a searchlight illuminating one part of experience while leaving the rest in shadow. But even James didn't grasp the full horror of what he was describing. He thought the shadow was passive, a neutral background waiting to be noticed. He didn't know that the brain actively constructs that shadow, that it doesn't just ignore the periphery, but erases it, suppresses it, prevents it from ever becoming conscious. In 1967, cognitive psychologist Ulrich Neisser took it further. He coined the term selective looking and demonstrated that people literally do not see things outside their attentional focus. He showed subjects overlapping videos, two scenes playing simultaneously, and asked them to follow one. Viewers could describe everything about the scene they were tracking, but the other scene, playing in full view the entire time, might as well have not existed. People couldn't recall a single detail. Neisser concluded that perception is not about what's in front of your eyes. It's about what your brain decides to let in. Then came 1999, and the gorilla. Simons and Chabris proved that inattentional blindness wasn't just about missing details. It was about missing entire, impossible-to-ignore objects. And more disturbingly, it applied to people. In follow-up experiments, they had a stranger walk up to a subject, ask for directions, and then, while the subject was mid-sentence, two people carrying a door walked between them.
Behind the door, the stranger swapped places with a completely different person. Different face, different clothes, different voice. And more than half the time, the subject never noticed. They kept giving directions to a person who was no longer there, blind to the fact that an entirely different human had taken their place. The implications were staggering. Your brain doesn't just erase people in crowds, it can erase people you're actively talking to. By 2003, neuroscientists had the technology to see what was happening inside the brain during these failures of perception. Using fMRI scans, they watched the superior colliculus, a small ancient structure in the midbrain, actively suppress signals from the visual cortex. When attention was focused, neural firing in regions responsible for processing unattended stimuli dropped to near zero. The brain wasn't passively ignoring them. It was shutting them down, blocking the signals before they could reach consciousness. The unattended didn't just fade, it was deleted. In 2015, researchers at Harvard discovered something even more unsettling. They found that the brain's attentional filter is biased. It doesn't erase randomly. It prioritizes certain stimuli, faces showing strong emotion, objects in motion, anything that might signal threat or reward. But neutral faces, people standing still, strangers going about their business, the brain categorizes them as irrelevant and suppresses them aggressively. In other words, if you're not emoting, not moving, not demanding attention, you are actively erased. This explains something psychologists had observed for years.
And here's what makes it existentially unbearable. The process is entirely automatic. You can't stop it. You can try to pay attention to everyone, to see every face, to acknowledge every person. But your brain will fight you, because the cost of processing every human in your environment is too high. The brain evolved in small tribes where you knew everyone and everyone mattered. But in a city of millions, the system breaks. It can't handle the volume. So it deletes, ruthlessly, constantly, without your consent. Consider the psychological weight of this. Every person you pass on the street is living a life as complex as yours, full of memories, fears, hopes, regrets. They have people who love them, people who depend on them, inner worlds as rich and chaotic as your own. But to your brain, they are less than furniture. They are voids, absences, gaps in perception. And you are the same to them. There's a man, let's call him David, who became obsessed with this after reading about inattentional blindness. He started doing an experiment. Every day on his commute, he would try to make eye contact with every person he passed. Not stare, just brief human acknowledgement. And he discovered something devastating. Most people's eyes would slide past him as if he weren't there. Not out of rudeness, not out of hostility. Their brains simply didn't register him as worth attending to. He was background, noise, erased. But occasionally, maybe 1 in 50, someone would meet his gaze. And in that moment, both brains would shift. The attentional spotlight would lock. The neural suppression would lift. And for a split second, both people would exist for each other. David described it as startling, almost painful, like suddenly being seen after hours of being invisible. And he realized this is what we're all starving for. Not love, not validation, just the basic neural acknowledgement that we exist. Psychologists call this social visibility, and it's one of the strongest predictors of mental health. People who feel seen, whose presence is regularly acknowledged by others, report lower rates of depression, anxiety, and loneliness. Not because being seen makes you happier, but because being erased is unbearable. It violates something fundamental about being human. We are social animals. Our brains are wired to exist in the attention of others. When that attention is withdrawn, when we are filtered out, suppressed, deleted, we experience it as a kind of death. And the cruelest part? The people erasing you don't know they're doing it. They're not cruel. They're not indifferent. Their brains are just doing what brains do,
conserving resources, focusing on what matters, deleting the rest. You are collateral damage in an evolutionary system designed for a world that no longer exists. But here's the thing, you can fight it. Not by forcing others to see you, that's exhausting and often impossible, but by changing how you see. Because the same mechanism that erases others from your perception also erases you from theirs. And if you stop erasing, if you force your brain to notice, something shifts. Try this tomorrow. Walk through a crowded place, a street, a store, a station. But this time, make yourself look at every face. Really look, not just glance. Hold your attention on each person for a full second. Notice their expression, their posture, the way they move. Force your brain to process them as human. You'll find it exhausting. Your brain will resist, pulling your attention back to your phone, your thoughts, your destination. Because seeing everyone is metabolically expensive. It takes energy, it takes effort. But when you do it, something extraordinary happens. The world becomes vivid again. The crowd stops being a blur and becomes a collection of individuals. And in some small way, you stop being erased too. Because the act of seeing makes you visible. Attention is reciprocal. When you notice, you are noticed. This is why performers, artists, teachers, anyone whose job requires holding attention, often report feeling hyper-visible in public. Their brains are trained to attend broadly, to scan for faces, to connect. And in doing so, they trigger the attentional systems of others. They become harder to erase. But most of us aren't performers. Most of us walk through the world half asleep, letting our brains conserve energy, letting the filter do its job. And so we drift through crowds of ghosts, erasing and being erased, believing we're alone even when surrounded by hundreds of people who are just as invisible as we are. The ancient philosophers were right to fear it. Being unseen is a kind of death. But they were wrong about one thing. The invisibility isn't metaphysical. It's not a punishment from God or a flaw in the soul. It's neurological. It's a feature of how brains work. And once you understand that, you realize the terrifying truth. Invisibility is the default state of human existence. Being seen is the exception, the anomaly, the brief, fragile moment when two attentional spotlights cross and two people, for just an instant, exist for each other. So here's the final question, the one that will follow you long after you read this. If your brain erases people to survive the noise of existence, and everyone's brain does the same, then how much of your life have you spent invisible? How many moments have you passed through neurologically deleted, existing only to yourself? And how many people have you erased without ever knowing they were there? The answer is